Hi, good morning. So this is our forum. We do this the second Sunday of the month, and we start at noon. Often the time that's listed is the old time, which shows a quarter of, but we find that people want to have coffee and talk with their friends, so we start at noon. Today we have Dave Coblentz, and he's going to talk about ultramarathon running, which is like well over the 25 miles that a normal marathon is. I think I can walk 25 miles, but I can't do 100 for sure. Certainly can't run the 100 or the 25. So Dave Coblentz, along with his partner Christine and his children Kai and Amaya, have been residents of Los Alamos since 2004. Coincidentally, that is the year that he ran his first 100-mile race, the Leadville 100. Who knows about Leadville? It's north of here and has a lot of nice 14ers. The biggest one is up there, Mount Elbert. Since then, he's completed more than 20 100-mile races and more than 120 ultramarathons of various distances. As a family of runners, all of the Coblentzes enjoy adventuring in the mountains, and they have completed many ultramarathon races. They have found the trails surrounding Los Alamos to be one of the treasures of our community. The following presentation about the Hardrock 100 will focus on David's experience with the race and what inspires him to keep running. If you get the Albuquerque Journal, you will see that yesterday there was an article about a woman who ran a 200-mile race. It took her a little over 3 days, and she shaved off 10 hours from the previous record. So I found that very interesting and a nice coincidence to go with David's talk. So, David?
So thank you, Evan, and thank you all for having me come to the forum today and talk about, well up there, one of my favorite topics, and that is the Hardrock 100. So Evan asked for a show of hands of who knows about Leadville. So who has heard of the Hardrock 100? So a few people. I was going to say if there was nobody raising their hand, I could also ask who has driven to Albuquerque? Right? Everybody, right? Everybody in the room. So to put this in context, to run the Hardrock 100 would be the same as running from Los Alamos to Albuquerque, but Mount Everest is in between. So you have to run up to 33,000 feet, down 33,000 feet, somewhere in the middle, and then 100 miles is at Albuquerque. So I hope I will be able to share with you not just why a race like this interests me and interests a large number of people, but also why we keep coming back for more. Right? That's the real question. So why talk about Hardrock? So the name Hardrock, let's start with the name Hardrock. So it's not hard in the sense of that's why they named it Hardrock, because it's a hard run. It was to honor the memory and run on the terrain that the Hardrock miners in Silverton were working with. It was predominantly silver mining, quote, hard rock mining, meaning they dug holes in the ground, blasted, and dug out rock and processed it for the gold and silver and lead. So the hard rock is respecting or honoring the hard rock runners. So it's the Hardrock 100, and I will have a map of where it is exactly here in a slide. But there are three things I wanted to talk about, and that is, what is some special things about Hardrock? Maybe some questions about ultra running in general. Why do people do this? How do you prepare? What happens out there? And then I do want to touch on the Los Alamos Hardrock connection. There is a very, very close connection between our community and the Hardrock 100. So just some facts and numbers. Probably an eye chart to see, but I will read through it. 2025 was the 30th running of Hardrock, and there were a number of cancellations through the year, 4 or 5, but it started in 1992. As I said, it was in conjunction with honoring the Hardrock miners, as well as trying to bring some economic stimulation to the mining towns. And the same thing with the Leadville 100. The organizers wanted to bring a tourist event to the town as the mines were shutting down in the early 90s. So the last mine, operating mine in Silverton, was closing down about this time. Lots of unemployment. The city administration was welcoming an event that would bring tourists to town. And you have to remember, at that time, Silverton, if you went to Silverton, you'd think it was a ghost town. Now Silverton is gentrified. Lots of people go there, exorbitant prices for housing. The train comes, the town is full of tourists. In 1992, that wasn't really the case. It was really an economic downturn time. So the Hardrock 100 also was trying to generate some economic stimulation for the town. It's like we said, it's labeled as a 100-miler. It's really 102.5, and believe me, when you get to 100.0 and you still have 2.5 miles to go, that makes a big difference. But technically, it's 102.5 miles. Like I said, it's 33,000 feet of climbing, so it's like climbing Everest and coming back down. The average elevation, which is really critical, is 11,000 feet. So your body operates very differently above 10,000 feet, and you can imagine if you're trying to eat and drink like you do at sea level, or even 7,000 feet here, it is a very different game. So not just the elevation climbing and not just the high point of 14,000 feet on on Handy's Peak, it's the fact that you spend a lot of time above 11,000 feet and your stomach goes bad, you're not eating, and then bad things happen, of course. So, like I said, the altitude's a challenge, weather is a challenge, somewhat course finding is a challenge, but lightning is by far the biggest hazard we have. And you've probably heard this year we had a fatality. We don't know exactly what happened, heart attack or a stroke or an aneurysm or some kind of sudden death for a runner. But we thought for sure, we of the organizing committee or the board of directors thought for sure lightning was going to be our first fatality, because we spend a lot of time above tree line. And in the afternoons in Colorado above tree line, that is not a really safe place to be. So that ranks right up there with some of the challenges. Instead of just getting your buckle or your ribbon, one of the key aspects or key characteristics of Hardrock is you must kiss the rock when you finish. And there's some pictures there on the right-hand side of various people kissing the rock. And some people take that a little bit lightly, but the race organizer or the race director, Dale Garland, won't stop your timer until you kiss the rock. And there was rumor that someone had, the time was still running for 43 months and 63 days, and they finally came back and kissed the rock and finally got their finishing time, which was well over the cutoff. So you must kiss the rock. And like I said, I touched on the history. 1992, the first Hardrock, there were 35-ish runners, I think, and maybe Dan can correct me. I believe there were 27 finishers, something like that. Around about 30 finishers. Fast forward to 2025, for this race, we had 3,200 people wanting to run and applying for 146 slots. Excuse me. So there are a lot of people don't get into Hardrock. So in the beginning, it wasn't clear that it would continue in 93, 94, because who wants to run this thing in the middle of nowhere? And now it is one of the premier running events, top 3 most popular 100-milers, along with the Western States and the UTMB, if you've heard of those. It's considered one of the 3 crown jewels of running. So it's a pretty big deal if you get into Hardrock. It's very difficult to get in. It's a weighted lottery. And since Los Alamos people are involved, it is a very complicated mathematical formula for getting tickets. And there's all this Monte Carlo simulations to tell people exactly their percentages. And if you do get in and you've never run it before, it's a very big deal. I touched on some of those cancellations. In total, if you count the the number of unique people that have finished Hardrock, there's 1,075 over 30 years. So finishers used to be several hundred, now it's 1,000, so it's not such a small club, but it is a pretty small club. And then our motto for Hardrock is wild and tough. So one of the things we try to do as the board of directors and try and moving forward is balance this popularity of Hardrock with the root of Hardrock, wild and tough, trying to keep it relatively small, relatively unique, and not have it be such like UTMB with several thousand people running. If in the mountains of Hardrock, when you're out on the course, you really do get into isolation, and it is really wild and tough when you're out there in the middle of the night and there's nobody else around. So that's one of the things we try to do. And some other values we really try to pay attention to is a sense of community. We do have a strong philanthropy to support trails and scholarships in that mountain area, the mountain town area of Ouray, Lake City, Telluride, and Silverton. And then, like I said, we tried to preserve the original philosophy of mountain running, and that is self-sufficiency, actually you and the mountain or the trails, not with a lot of support. So I've been asked a few times, where is Hardrock? Well, this is a map of Colorado up in the upper left here. So this is Colorado. These are the Rockies, of course. The San Juan Mountains are this little east-west extension. Terry Wallace gives a great talk every year up at Hardrock on the geology and how the San Juans formed. I don't have 3 hours, unless people want to stay, talk about the geology, but I'd love to. But the San Juan Mountains, that's the heart of Hardrock. And the actual course is this circular course that starts and ends in Silverton, goes over near Lake City, Ouray, Telluride, back to Silverton. And we switch direction every year. So one year is clockwise, the next year is counterclockwise. So all the climbs you hated one year become the downhills you can hate the next year. And so and depending if it's snowy, of course, the north sides are different. You can have snowpack, and that you're either climbing the snow or you're glissading down the snow. So in general, the clockwise direction, because all the north slopes sometimes have snow and you can glissade down them, is generally considered the faster direction by an hour or two on average for everybody. So if we look at the elevation profile here, this is the elevation of Los Alamos, 7,700 feet or so, and the high point is 14,000 feet. So this is 7,000 feet of vertical, and you can see the elevation profile is quite serious, and there is a lot of climbing in there. So, like I said, you're living in Los Alamos. Los Alamos is just about the same elevation as the lowest point on the race in Ouray, 7,700 feet, 7,600 feet or so. So you spend a lot of time, like I said, above 11,000 feet, which is this line right here. I can tell there's lots of people thinking, how do I sign up? So I've listed some questions here. I have some questions I'd like to throw out or anticipate some of your questions, and I would love to leave enough time to have questions back, because I'm sure you have unique questions that I haven't thought of. But in general, the question is, why would you want to run Hardrock? And a lot of people, and myself included, go back to JFK's quote about, we do things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And if you think about that, there's a lot of sense in that. You want a challenge, you want something that's different than your everyday life, you want to start something that you don't know you're going to finish. Of course, he had that quote for sending man to the moon by the end of the decade. NASA certainly didn't have very high or super high confidence about being able to do that. And so equivalently, when you toe the line in Hardrock, even a veteran such as myself, it's not really clear that you're going to finish. And so that makes the experience very unique and special, because you work through all these problems, 40 hours of running, digestion problems, water problems, lightning problems, and at the end of a couple of days, you're going to finish, and then that's a really good feeling. So we do hard rock because it's hard, not because it's easy. Oh, the Los Alamos connection. Yes, I wanted to talk about that. So does anybody know Charlie Thorne and John Kappas back in the day here? So they were the original founders of hard rock back in the 1991-92. They designed the course along with Gordon Hardman, and they decided, is it possible to design a 100-mile course to the San Juans? And we'll leave aside the question, could someone actually do it? And they designed it, and everybody knows Charlie and John. They went out many weekends, found some great course, great ways to connect trails. Not everything was on a trail. And then the next year, they just put an ad in Ultra Running magazine, and 50 people, 35 people showed up to try it. And when they towed the line that year, they really didn't know if someone could finish it in 48 hours or not. And so there's quite a special connection with Los Alamos all the way from the beginning. And then I've listed a number of people here in town that have either finished hard rock or are on the board. Blake Wood, Chris Kern, Tom Stockton, Bill Geist, Jason Halliday. If you know some of these people, they've all participated in hard rock. And there are many other people who help support hard rock, either crewing or pacing or working on the run committee. So there's quite a community here that goes up to Silverton every year and helps out with hard rock. So it really is a community event. And remember, one of our core values was community. And so it's not just about the 146 runners every year that can finish it. It's the 500 volunteers that are helping them do that. It's the families, my family included, that come up every year and pace and crew and have a week up in Silverton enjoying the Hard Rock Week. I touched on this before. Who wants to run this kind of race? Like I said, we limit the number to, and I speak we because I'm on the board of directors, so we is literally we decide how many people can do this. I mentioned, or Evan mentioned Leadville. Leadville now has 900 starters, and the experience of Leadville is very different than I had back in 2004 when there was 250 starters. It is crowded, it is crazy. It is not the experience of solitude in the mountains that we value in hard rock. So we have worked and struggled with this number for quite a while. Lots of pressure to make that 300 or 500. But the core values of hard rock, the experience we want to share with the newer runners is more that, I won't say solitary or solitude in the mountains, but not have aid stations so crowded that there are 50 people in line for aid station. Why don't you come into an aid station, you see one or two people, not dozens of people all running with you. I mentioned this year we had 3,800 entrants, and so this lottery is a very big deal. First weekend in December, lots of people get online, and it's staggered by tickets, or it's a weighted lottery, so some people have a better chance than others. And when people get in, it's on social media, you can see some pretty strong reactions. And then that's typically December 4th, 5th, or 6th. And then by December 14th, they're suddenly saying, oh, what have I gotten into? Because then they start looking at the map, thinking about training, and July is only 7 months away from December. So things get serious very fast. How to prepare? I've been asked a lot of times I get asked, how do you run? Do you run 100 miles every week to get ready for a 100-miler? And my answer is no, because it takes a long time to recover from 100, so you don't want to run 100 too close to the 100 you're running. And consistency and a good base of running is much more important, and hills, than total distance. And so I do a lot of hill repeats up on Pajarito Mountain starting in March, or whenever I can get up there when the snow melts out, and just go up the Aspen Lift 3 or 4 times, 3 times a week for a few months. And that gets me prepared for hard rock. So I don't have to get above 10,000 feet. I don't have to go run 100 miles. And my mileage per week is about 50 miles, 60 miles a week, 70 as we get closer. So not hundreds of miles and not lots of time above 10,000 feet, but consistency and just building up that endurance base is what's very important. Oh, and I put a note there. I personally do racing as training. So I will sign up for 50 milers starting in April, May, June, try to do a 50-mile race leading up to Hardrock in July. And that's typically good enough endurance training. If I can be doing those 50s with a smile on my face, then typically I have a smile on my face at Hardrock, at least at the end. Maybe not in the middle. And Dan has paced me there, so he knows there's some dark times in the middle. That's not all fun and games. So what happens out there? What can go wrong? I mentioned the elevation issues, and there's another question that people ask me a lot. Do you run the whole thing? And to be honest, even the elite runners are not running the whole thing. They power hike up the hills, and they run down fast down the downhills. But the rest of us, at least the first half, we're hiking up and running down, and maybe towards the end of the race, hiking up and maybe hiking down a little bit, if nobody, depending on how serious your pacer is to keep you going. So no, we do not run the whole race. So a 100-mile run is more of a metaphor than an actuality, especially in the mountains, especially above 11,000 feet, and especially above 13,000 feet. Not a lot of running up there. I mentioned the lightning issue. We've had some very close calls. Lightning bolts have struck near people and knocked them down. We haven't had a direct hit of lightning, but it is a very big concern for us. And there's a 48-hour cutoff for Hardrock designed not because the board of directors want you to take that long to do it, but so that you have time to sit in an aid station for 2 hours if there's a lightning storm and it's too dangerous to go up on a ridge. So we designed the generous cutoffs, 48 hours, so that if lightning comes in, you can, in principle, just find a car or find a safer place for several hours. Unfortunately, a lot of people run right on the cutoffs, and then there's a lightning storm, and then they don't have any extra time, and so then they go out anyway, and that's where we're going to get in trouble with someone getting hit by lightning. I often get asked, what do you eat on these runs? And you've probably seen lots of advertisements. There's these gels, there's these high energy drinks, and if you have 40-plus hours of running and you start eating these gels and these very super sweet concoctions, that lasts about 5 to 10 hours. You can think, oh, those taste okay, I can keep those down. But after about 10 hours or 20 hours or 30 hours, your body just says, I've had enough of gels, or energy drinks. And so a lot of people switch to more natural foods because your level of intensity is actually low enough that when you're hiking up these hills, you can digest real food. And so people do drink a lot more soups. They eat rice and beans or rice and avocados or some kind of a tortilla wrap. They take it with them from an aid station on the next big hill and eat as they hike up the hill. Like a peanut butter and jelly tortilla is, 300 or 400 calories. That's a great bit of calories. And if you can get 300 calories an hour into your body, you'll survive. If you're doing 100 calories an hour, that's not going to work after 30 or 40 hours. So if you think about a sandwich, a 300 or 400 calorie sandwich, if you can get that down over the course of an hour, you're doing pretty good. Another question I get asked a lot is, do you sleep on the run? And most people don't. Most people just gut through. I used to gut through the nights, and lately I've just been deciding laying down and just going through the act of falling asleep will get rid of those dwindles. Everybody knows about these dwindles if you're in a lecture like this, and if I was droning on for 4 hours, you would be nodding off. That's what I call the dwindles, and you get that when you're in the middle of the night when you're trying to move through the mountains, and you start to doze off literally while you're trying to walk, and that gets kind of dangerous up in the mountains. And you can fight it and fight it and fight it for hours, or you can just say, I'm going to sit down on the ground, I'm going to lay down on the ground for 5 minutes, let the body just go to sleep, wake up, and then those dwindles go away. So it's not sleeping so much as closing your eyes or just laying down for a minute A lot of people do that. Others will just do the whole thing without trying to take any rest at all. Caffeine is used quite a bit, of course. And then a final question. What do you think about? Don't you get bored? And so I get that a lot too. You're out there for 30 or 40 hours. Do you listen to music? No, I don't. Some people do. What do you think about? And it's very meditative, and it is almost like a meditation when if you ask a meditator, you're going to meditate for a half an hour or an hour or 6 days. Don't you get bored while you're meditating? Well, it's the same thing, or the same kind of question with running. There's plenty of things that occupy your mind, and you can actually do the same techniques as during meditation to focus or not focus. So it is almost like a spiritual practice when you're out there for a really long time without someone. If you know the next station is 6 or 8 hours away and you have no music and you're just thinking about, did I eat? When was the last time I ate? What should I drink? What sounds do I hear? And you'd be surprised how that's not a question for most runners or a problem for most runners. It's a problem for non-runners, so to speak, right? And then why come back for more? I've finished Hardrock 13 times. It's consumed the life of my family for 20 years. We go up there, and some of the values some of the parts of it that keep bringing us back are the sense of community, of course, the mountains, and this shared experience piece. After a few times of going up there with your family and sharing the week and sharing this accomplishment and working with your family at aid stations, and the children grow up with that and start to say, wow, Hardrock is one of the highlights of my summer, or I remember this from 10 years ago. It was one of my favorite memories. And I was a coach at the high school cross country team for the high school cross country team, and I would bring the high school runners up to actually pace with me and show them Hardrock. So that act of sharing the experience is a really big part of what, for me personally, why I keep coming back for more. So it's not just, I want to finish Hardrock one more time. It's, yeah, I like to finish Hardrock because I have all this experience I share with my family and others, and I enjoy the mountains. And so it's kind of an ensemble of reasons, not just one reason. I just wanted to touch on, I mentioned that I'm on the board of directors and of the pressures that are on Hardrock to change, and that's happening in this context of the growth of ultra running. So this is 1999. This is when I started ultra running probably back over here somewhere, but this is the number of North American races. In 1999 was 143, including Leadville, Hardrock, some others. Now it's 2,700 races in North America in 2025. And the number of ultra runners has also gone up by a factor of 10. 11,000 people finished one or another kind of an ultra run back in 1999. Last year, 130,000 people. So it's mainstream, and there are a lot of people that have finished ultra runs. And we've seen it here locally with our Haymes run. Lots of people run the 50K. You probably all know someone who does the local ultra run. 20 years ago when I was running it, all I got was strange looks of like, what? 50 miles? What? Now it's, whoa, you run 50 miles? Yeah, so what? I've run a 100 or a 200 or a 250 miler, right? So it's exploded, and that has caused pressure on Hardrock to change quite a bit. And like I said, this is what it looked like 15 years ago. You can see just the rock sitting in the street, someone coming into the finish line. This is the actual person who was winning Hardrock in 2005. There's not a lot of people out there, a few people, because he's the #1 guy, right? So, and that compared to what it looks like now is very different. So even though we're trying to maintain or preserve some of those original values of Hardrock, Hardrock is changing. It is becoming it has a lot of trappings, a lot of glitz, a lot of glamour. It's recognized, lots of press. And so trading off on that is something we really work on. So like I said, there's running hard rock versus running hard rock in the sense of managing hard rock. And so Hardrock is one of the few nonprofit races in North America now. Most races are for profits, so that's a big piece of that. So as a nonprofit, we have a board of directors, and we deal with these issues that I've listed, that I've talked about already in this talk. Access issues, permits, the huge growth, philanthropy, threats to the course in the sense of private people building private homes. We heard the rumors this year, earlier in the year, about selling off of public lands. Well, if there are some pretty choice public lands on the Hardrock course, that gets sold to private developers as part of some government philosophy, that could totally change Hardrock. So that's something that the board of directors, we look at and consider. So not just the logistics of what color t-shirt this year, but in the next few years, what are going to be the impacts or threats to Hardrock? So I'm going to leave it with just a few pictures across the years. This was back when there was just, like I said, just the Hardrock, and right after the finish, it's, well done, go get a burger somewhere in town. And this was just last year. This was actually a Telluride. Amaya, who was here, is now here, pacing me. She ran almost 30 miles of Hardrock with me, 2 long legs of it. And she's starting to think about qualifiers to enter the lottery herself. Unfortunately, family of the board of directors don't get any special consideration, so she'll probably be running Hardrock when she's my age. And then just some more scenes. Like I said, it's quite an event now. These are some scenes. Dan Ryan right here, he's back in the back there. This is when we were up at this little aid station that literally, this aid station is smaller than this stage, up at 13,000 feet at Virginia's Pass above, when you come out of Ouray, up on your way to Telluride, that little knife edge. They build an aid station right in there, and that's pretty comfy. Wait, that's not Dan, that's Chris Twiggs. Sorry. You lose a lot of brain cells at Hardrock, and it takes a few months to remember. And then I just had some more pictures. Aid stations, one of the issues the board of director we have to consider is how many people want to get into these aid stations, which are very remote, trailheady. There's only parking for a few people, and 50 people want to show up with cars. Forest Service doesn't like that. BLM doesn't like that. If you're impacting other users, so just to put a wrapper around it, that's something the board of directors needs to consider is how do we manage the crews and support vehicles going to these remote places. This is Animas Forks, if anybody's been up there. If anybody's been up in the Silverton area, for example. And then this is just a typical picture of the landscape we go through. So you can see there's a lot of hiking. No one's going to be running up that thing. So with that, I wanted to open it up for questions. And I touched on a few things, anticipating questions, but feel free to ask whatever. Go ahead, Tina had her hand up first there. I can repeat the question.
Thank you. Oh, now it's on. Yeah. Hey, thank you. That was fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about like the pacing, like you were talking about, and what that entails? Like, yeah, how Maya does that, how you do that as well, like just some of the ins and outs of being a pacer.
So, yeah, there are two types of pacers in general. The elites have pacers to keep them on a pace. That's where the word comes from. And so the pacer will pick up the runner and they say, okay, I need to be at the next aid station by this time. And they take off at that pace. And the runner, who's an elite, will go with them. And it's about racing, right? That's not the kind of pacer I use. Because typically I'm not too concerned about a finishing time, plus or minus a few hours. So I like to share my experience with pacers. So I'll have a pacer, like I said, some high school students or my daughter, Amaya, and it's more of, okay, we're gonna be out there for 10 hours. This is the terrain we're gonna be going over. If it's at night, you need a headlamp, and making sure your pacer knows what they're getting into and have done some training so you don't get halfway through that terrain and your pacer needs to drop. That becomes very awkward. And so communicating with your pacer is important, making sure they're prepared. At Hardrock, you can actually sign up for pacers on a spreadsheet, and so that's a little bit of a gamble that you're picking someone you don't know and you're going out there, because as Dan will attest, there's a lot of special conversations that happen with your pacer, and it's, in my mind, better to share it with someone you know and trust and won't be putting that up on Facebook. But some people want, the anonymity of someone they don't know who will just get them through the night. So there's a lot of facets to that answer.
Can you wait?
Oh, yeah, that's right. At Hardrock, you can have, when you're over 60, you can have a pacer the whole way. And so normally, most runners pick up a pacer at the halfway mark, at the 50-mile mark. Since I'm over 60, I could have a pacer the whole way. So this year I had Amaya join us at the very start when everybody's happy and smiling, and there's lots of goodwill, and everybody's having a good time hiking the first 10 miles. So that was a part of the Hardrock she'd never seen before, because she had always in the past picked me up at 50 miles when I'm not at the best attitude. And so I was very happy to have her show her, like, hey, I really like doing this, see? I think Bill had his hand up earlier.
To train?
Excuse me?
Do people come here to train? And could we have some sort of a festival or a ceremony for them?
So, whereas the swimming pool here is the highest swimming pool in the world, and so the Japanese swim team comes here specifically to Los Alamos to train. In the running world, there's a lot of terrain that's above 7,000 feet, so there's nothing special about the Los Alamos trails that brings people here. So very few people actually come to Los Alamos specifically to train for Hardrock. They go to Silverton in June when the snow melts out to train for Hardrock, although we who live here in Los Alamos do a lot of training for it here. So I personally don't go anywhere else. I go over to the Sangres and run up here on these hills, and that gets me, for the most part, the training I need.
How far is it between your way stations, and who gets you that sandwich out there at the 40-mile marker or something?
So roughly, the aid stations are roughly 10, 12-ish miles apart. And with the pace we're going on this, that is 4 or 5 hours-ish. So it is a long time, even though it's not a long distance. So say a 10-mile or 12-mile section could be over Handy's Peak, which is a 14er. So that takes a little bit of time. The aid stations are well stocked. They have their own food prep, and you can get a lot of interesting foods at the aid station, including brisket and pumpkin pie and fruit and all kinds of hot drinks. And they have big tents with lots of food service at those. Most of the bigger aid stations are accessible by vehicles, so they can bring in lots of things. So all I had to do was say, I'd like that. I like a turkey sandwich with avocado and cheese, and boom, I get it. So it's kind of nice. Bill?
What's the finishing fraction, and how does that compare to other ultra events?
Now you would think that a race like this would have a very low percentage. So 100 milers in general have a percentage finish rate in the 60 or 70% range. Leadville is even somewhat less because they don't have qualifiers for that. We typically have about an 80, 83% finish rate at Hardrock, which is actually quite high. So I think there are two factors. One, like I said, we require qualifying hundreds, which are other hard mountain hundreds, to be able to even apply to Hardrock. So first you have to run Leadville, which I did in 2004, and then you can apply for Hardrock. So I think that makes it, puts the bar pretty high. And two, it's so hard to get into Hardrock. If you get in, you will finish unless they carry you out in a gurney, right? Whereas at Leadville, you say, oh, my feet hurt, I think I'm gonna stop. I can always do it next year. It's not a big deal, I'll just pay the money and do it. especially about half the field every year are first-timers at Hardrock, and I think they take it very, very seriously and don't drop just for any reason.
I had a question. You said, I think it was 1075 people had finished. Like if you finish 13 times, do you count as 13 of those people?
One.
What?
So those are the unique finishers. Yeah.
Those are unique
I
finishers, okay.
I think it's something like 3,000 or 4,000 finishes, adding up, people, someone who's finished 20 times, that's 20 plus, but those are the number of unique names on a list that have finished at least once.
Are wildlife ever a safety hazard?
Not particularly. Bears have been seen, lions have been seen, skunks have been seen, wasps. They aren't listed as a particular hazard any more than running here. Usually at these big organized runs, there's enough people, unless you're number one leading the pack. By the time 10 people come down the trail, any bear with any sense is on the other ridge. And so the wildlife definitely get away. There are a lot of stream crossings, and so hypothermia, it gets to be a bit of a problem because you cross some of these streams that are almost waist deep, and they're ice cold, and they're 10 feet across, and you get cold. So wildlife, I'd say, is fairly low on the list of hazards that we have to deal with.
Can you talk a little bit about the mental challenge?
Great question. So whenever if I was mentioning Hardrock, I'm sure you were thinking all this elevation, all this, so you must be an Iron Man to be able to do all this. You must climb thousands of feet. And yeah, that's important preparation, but by far the mental attitude will carry the day more than physical prep by far. And so after 50 miles or so, you need the training to get you there, but you really need the mental attitude to finish the race, because no matter how well you prepare, you're going to have a bad spot at mile 60, mile 70, and you have a long way to go. And unless you're 100% committed in your mind that I can get through this, this is just some bothersome thing, not, oh, boo-hoo, poor me, my feet hurt, I have to drop. Being able to understand that or acknowledge that. And it's a bit like the meditation part I was talking about. You acknowledge the distraction, and then you just carry on with what you're doing. You carry on with meditation, or you carry on with a run. And if you don't have that, you will not succeed. So people ask me how to prepare for Hardrock. I say, well, eat something that upsets your stomach, get in the shower, take all your clothes off, and then run around the block at night. And that'll help you.
What kind of injuries do you see, serious injuries, or even things like electrolyte imbalances, delirium, that kind of thing? Do you see that there?
Yeah, a lot of that manifests itself. You're mentioning electrolyte imbalance and getting too hot. And this year was a very hot year, so a lot of people have digestive problems that are tied to that electrolyte, even though they don't know. It's not an obvious connection, but you can't drink enough, you get hyponatremic, and you start to lose your stomach, say. There's also, altitude sickness is a very big deal here. We get edemas here, we get pulmonary problems, especially people coming from Indiana, New Jersey, and we have a lot of people coming from the lowlands. They try to acclimate, and it doesn't work too well. Los Alamos people will run it. Living at 7,000 feet, you can get away with it. I can go up to 14,000 feet, and I don't particularly have much of a problem. But if you live at 800 feet, and you come up to Silverton, 9,000 feet, and you start this thing, you can definitely have that. Foot problems, twisted foot problems. We had one runner, a leader, he was leading the race at mile 15. He fell and dislocated his shoulder, and he just taped it up and finished and set the course record. So, there are people who can do some pretty credible things.
Along the trail, do you have stashes of like change of clothes or different shoes or things like that?
You can have what are called drop bags at the aid stations, at particular aid stations, and you can put clothes and whatever you want there. We have a rule for the race: you cannot get aid or have anything in between the aid stations. And so we disqualified a runner, someone who's on course record pace, lead runner #1, and he took water from a car outside of an aid station, and we had no choice but to disqualify him. And we couldn't get word to him until 10 miles before the end of the race. So he did that at 50 miles in, and we couldn't communicate to him until 90 miles in that he's disqualified. So he understood, but he was still a little bit.
But you can carry that sandwich or that
Yes.
water on your back. Or
And people
whatever.
carry these hydration packs that you don't want to go in the mountains without a jacket, pants, hat, headlamp, and some food in a pack. So everybody carries a pack, and you can refresh it at these aid stations. Yeah, yeah.
Anyone else?
You've done this 13 times.
No.
You must be favored to get accepted. Since it's so hard to get in on it.
Yeah, it's based on the number of times you've done it, whether or not you're a first-time finisher or have finished it before. And there are these, you build up these service tickets. So my service on the board gets me an extra ticket. So to answer your question, yes, I have a fairly large number of tickets, but still my percentage chance of getting in is about 65%, which is better than a first-timer with one ticket has 0.03% chance of getting in. So I can't complain. For example, this last year I was on the wait list, but I was #1 on the wait list. So I didn't get in the lottery. I was on the wait list, but high enough that I got in.
Thank you so much for a great forum presentation. It was super. What is the policy about performance-enhancing drugs, before the race and during the race?
Yeah, so you saw this growth of ultra running, and ultra running is not immune, as all sports are, to performance-enhancing drugs. That being said, since we don't have a $50,000 purse, it's not the Tour de France where you make your career for winning it, there's a little less pressure on a race like Hardrock that people are taking performance-enhancing drugs. So in our rules, that in the agreement form that runners sign, we reserve the right to drug test if someone runs an 18-hour Hardrock and it's so anomalous from what they did. We could test for drugs, but testing for drug use or performance-enhancing drugs is so expensive. We basically can't afford to test everybody, or even the top 10 finishers like they do at, say, Western States or something, where there's a more prestige to winning that race, if you will. Ironically, the people who probably are going to be using the performance-enhancing drugs are people like me who, finished fast times in the past, are over 60 years old, are starting to slow down, and all we want to do is get back to the glory days of 36-hour finish, right? not win the race. And so there could be a lot of performance-enhancing drugs in the mid-pack for people who are taking them just so that they achieve what they think they expect or deserve as a time-wise, and they're not doing it to win the race, they're just doing it to get a particular time they want. And we don't test for that, and good on you. If you feel you need to take drugs to meet your expectations, well, that's a sad story, but we're not going to be policing that.
So what is the current best time for this, and what is your PR?
Yeah, back in the glory days, when in that picture there, that picture in 2008 was my fastest time. I ran it in 32:40. And this year I ran it in 42 something. So basically 10 hours. So that's the glory. That's like, I'm never going to be able to run it again. Although there was a 60-year-old this year who set the 60-year-old course record 31 hours and 20 minutes, which as Tyler was mentioning, that raises a flag in my mind of, Anyway, the course record, Dan, you're going to have to help me out. It's 21 something? 21:37. So literally when I'm halfway in Ouray, the fastest one, yeah, the other direction. But within an hour or so. literally, when I'm halfway through, the leading runners are finishing, which is not something I like to think about when I'm in UA. But good on them. I mean, they literally go twice as fast as I'm
Yeah,
going.
but you're out there doing it.
Yeah, and that goes back to the value in the mountains community. So there has to be more to Hard Rock than a
Do you have
time,
another question?
for sure.
Any other questions?
I think there was back there, Dave.
I'm sorry.
If I understand, then you start in the morning, run all day, run all night, and finish sometime the next day?
Yes. And there's an informal goal of most people to finish before sunset the second night. Because going into the second night, that's when strange things happen. So 48 hours is 6 o'clock. We start at 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday, and you have until 6 in the morning on Sunday. But if you're out there between midnight on Saturday night and 6 in the morning, that's when strange things happen. The hallucinations start, the little people come out, and there are lots of stories of people who are finishing 47 hours, 48 hours, and they definitely see strange things on the trail. So most people don't want to go into that second night because that's very tough.
Any other questions? Well, I agree. It was
Okay,
a
thank
fantastic
you.
talk.
Thank you all.